Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Films. My name is Alan and I'm wearing pants today. Now, I finally watched the live-action remake of Mulan and it completely made dishonor to my ancestors. Growing up as a young Chinese-American boy, out of all of the Disney princesses, it was always Mulan that I related to the most. I understood Mulan and the burden placed on her shoulders. I respected her filial piety, which was beaten into me at a young age. I enjoyed her respect for her country. I liked her magical dragon friend and the wonderful songs that taught me about manhood and how to kill my historical ethnic enemy, the Huns. Be a man. Mulan was never supposed to be taken seriously because it was an animated film, and animated films are for children and therefore are not supposed to be serious or have deep meaning and give you feels. Pixar and Studio Ghibli. With those lower expectations, audiences were pleasantly surprised by Mulan. This was a simple animated film based on an ancient Chinese legend. And yes, there were very mature and important topics discussed in this film, like sexism, misogyny, and how pervasive it was within ancient Northern Wei dynasty's imperial military, or something like that. And more importantly, it gave a young Chinese American kid like me someone to look up to. Because Mulan actually looked like me, but in drag. Now, when Mulan came into theaters in 1998, the world was a very different place. China's economy was growing rapidly, but their GDP was still smaller than Italy, France, UK, Germany, and Japan, and some other countries. Speaking of Japan, just a decade earlier, Ronald Reagan had started a trade war against the Empire of the Rising Sun. They were flooding the American markets with cheaper and superior automobiles and consumer electronics. There were also accusations of reverse engineering and intellectual property theft from the Japanese companies. Sound familiar? Well, the point is, at the time when Disney was making this film, they didn't really consider the possible political ramifications their film would have in China because they didn't really care about the Asian audience at all. Mulan was made specifically for the Western audience. Plus, back then, the Chinese box office was a lot smaller. Today, it actually is even larger than the United States box office. Also, back then, the Chinese Communist Party was even more strict with how they censored and restricted movies from coming into their country. In 1998, Babe, Pig in the City was censored from Chinese audiences because of a policy that did not allow live-action animals to be depicted with speech abilities. And so, for better or worse, when Mulan was created, there wasn't all of this political pressure surrounding the film. Disney simply made another princess film, but this one centered around a famous Chinese legend, Hua Mulan, and it was mostly received with positivity. Not just amongst American fans, but also Asian American fans, and even mainland Chinese fans appreciated the passion and appreciation put behind this entire project. If anything, it really does expose Americans to Chinese culture in a very positive and beneficial way. Sure, there were many uncharacteristic things happening in the film that were very westernized, like Mulan's interactions and mannerisms with his family members and the portrayal of the historical background surrounding the film, but it was an animated movie. It had talking dragons and spirits, musical numbers, and more importantly, it was well made and a very entertaining movie. And ultimately, that should be the only thing that really matters when we look at a film. Then comes the live-action reboot of Mulan, one of the many recent Disney live-action reboots. This film was surrounded and mired in controversy before production even stopped. First, Disney was under fire for shooting Mulan in Xinjiang province in China. This is the area where the Chinese Communist Party are running re-education camps for their Uyghur ethnic minority. It's a long and complicated story full of human rights abuse, terrorism, culture war, and forced conformity. And it's not quite the Armenian genocide or Holocaust what's going on there, but it is one of the largest and most coordinated efforts to wipe out a culture in modern history. It's some pretty grim stuff, and more troubling is the fact that there is very little opposition to this policy within China itself. To make matters worse, the Mulan film thanks the government security agency in Xinjiang province in the credits. This is one of the government agencies responsible for these human rights abuses. And then, of course, you have the controversy surrounding the actress who portrayed Mulan, Liu Yifei. She criticized the pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong, which of course led to even more cries to boycott Mulan. Liu Fei also drew the anger of Chinese audiences for calling herself Asian in a Variety interview. So yeah, she's getting it from both sides, and yes, there is identity politics even in China. So as you can see, live action Mulan was already in a lot of trouble before they even started, doing the promos and everything. Look, it's difficult to reboot something that people love. And Disney should know this because they own Marvel and Star Wars. When it comes to rebooting Mulan as a live-action film, they only had two choices, really. One was to make a musical that featured like a CGI dragon, which of course is played by Eddie Murphy. It would have kept in line with the spirit of the original film, which had many lighthearted moments that made the climactic scenes that much better. Or they could have went the complete opposite way and showed their respect for Chinese culture by recreating things in as realistic of a way as possible. I'm talking about amazing period accuracy when it comes to character dress and what kind of weapons they use. This would have been really great, and you could have gotten rid of some of the more fantastical parts of the story and focused more on the heroics of Hua Mulan, whose story, by the way, is epic enough to stand on its own in any type of medium without any kind of flourish. But instead, what we get is this very confusing film that doesn't know what it really is. It destroys some of the major themes that make the original movie so powerful, and at the same time, it also pisses off the American audience, it pisses off the Asian American audience, and it pisses off the mainland Chinese audience. No one wanted to see this movie. I mean, the core message behind the story of Mulan is that she is a woman in a man's world which is dictated by strength, action, and physical prowess. Traits that in the Northern Wei dynasty were only associated with men. But Mulan fails to be deterred by these things, these social norms, and works as hard as all of the other men in her military unit, and through sheer perseverance and her quick thinking, she was able to not only save her entire army, but all of China. Mulan does not succeed because she tries to be a man. Mulan succeeds because she is capable of achieving the virtues of a warrior. Virtues that men believe they have a monopoly on. Mulan doesn't defeat the Huns using her physical power and strength, or some masculine head-on assault. Instead, she uses her intelligence in finding better strategies. She also uses the equalizer of sexes on the battlefield, gunpowder, to achieve one of her greatest victories. And through her brave action, quick thinking, and loyalty to her beloved country, she wins the respect of all of the other men in her unit. Better yet, her actions have also changed the Emperor's view on women, which will lead to massive changes for the entire empire. Live-action Mulan decides that this amazing story of a Chinese heroine is not enough. Instead of allowing Mulan to be a normal girl who happens to be brave and intelligent, they give Mulan Qi, a mystical and magical energy that seems to be pervasive through Disney lore ever since they bought that other franchise with a mystical and magical energy. That's not to say that Qi and Qigong don't have their own very amazing and colorful history, and that the Force from Star Wars most likely was based on these Eastern concepts in the first place. But now things have kind of come full circle.
The Force is with me, and I am with the Force.
The Qi pervades the universe and all living things.
It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together.
But only the most true will connect deeply to his Qi and become a great warrior.
And I fear nothing, for all this, as the Force wills it.
And Disney's main addition to the Mulan reboot is by adding a very Star Wars element to a story that didn't really need it in the first place. And they did this all at the expense of cutting out Eddie Murphy's Mushu dragon because I guess it's unrealistic, and instead replaced him by making Shan Yu's beloved pet falcon Hayabusa into a suppressed witch lady that no one asked for and is nowhere near as interesting as Eddie Murphy making essentially observational comedy about the ridiculous situation that Mulan finds herself in. And so instead we get this tortured witch lady who is extremely powerful on the battlefield, can shape-shift, and yet for some reason she still needs the Huns to destroy the male patriarchy that is limiting her freedoms as a female or something like that. Not once does she consider the fact that society is shunning her because she is a terrifying monster who can change into an animal and then back to a human. She's also extremely adept at killing people. To make matters even worse, later on in the movie, she witnesses Mulan leading men into battle as a commander, and she admires Mulan, and so she just simply decides to switch sides and sacrifices her life in order to save Mulan. Yes, I know her character does not make any sense, and I know there is a lot of similarities between Mulan and the Witch Lady and Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader.
Merge your path with mine.
With our combined strength,
We will be stronger together.
we can end this destructive conflict.
You can still take the noble path.
Come with me.
Now, it's too late for me.
You don't know the power of the dark side.
I could rant for hours about how terrible this movie is, about all the terrible changes they unnecessarily made, or the fact that the color palettes they used in this movie were completely off for the time period and that the weapons and clothing made no sense. This movie is the equivalent of American audiences watching a Chinese-made film about the Revolutionary War, but instead of having colonial Minutemen using muskets, they have M16s, and instead of having the redcoats wearing red, they wear black, because that's what the artist thought would look cool at the time. But these are all just symptoms of the real problem. I mean, Disney has long lost sight of what matters in movie making. It used to just be about entertainment. Even back then, when there were less producers and money backers, those financial people who put the money forth for these projects understood that if the art connects with the audience, then the money will follow. Nowadays, we see Disney hire cheap directors, terrible B-rate screenwriters, and add pretty faces, and basically depend on their old franchises' legacies to bring in audiences. These are all trash films. Mulan represented so much more to the audience before Disney fine-tuned their profit model. It's very clear with this generation of live-action remakes that Disney does not care about anything. They don't care about making entertainment. They don't care about propping up the arts and cultures and enlivening the lives of children who watch their content. They don't even care about the wokeness and political correctness they claim to care about. Everything is about money. At the end of the day, this is a ruthless corporation that has access to ridiculous amounts of your childhood memories and has essentially created a monopoly on all future content directed to kids. A lot of cultures have stories like the legend of Mulan, and these aren't just for entertainment purposes. These are really just like pieces of wisdom and lessons that are being, handed down to us from previous generations. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful parts of human culture, the fact that we can gather our knowledge, write it down, and pass it down from one generation to another. It's actually the thing that I treasure more than anything, even more than our technology, because over thousands of generations, the ancient Chinese people finally figured out that you can't oppress women because it essentially means that half of your society is not fulfilling their potential. I mean, these are very important lessons that we can learn a lot from, and we really, really should not allow essentially evil corporations to take control of these beautiful legends and make profit out of them. That is why it is disrespectful to my ancestors, because that is probably not what they wanted to happen with the legend of Mulan. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. My name is Alan, reminding you that life is a movie and you are the protagonist.